How the Celtic languages came to be. There are several variations on the basic story, but according to the early Irish chronicle Labar Gabala Arian, or the Book of Invasions of Ireland, Scota was the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh named Singras. She married Newell, son of Fenis Fersech, a Babylonian, whose great-great-grandfather was the Noah of the Bible's Old Testament. Now, Scota and Newell had a son, Gologlas, who gave his name to the race he founded, the Gaels. He is also said to have created the Gaelic language by combining the best features of the 72 known languages then in existence. Now, this story dates back to John Fordoun's 5-volume Chronica Gentis Scotorum, published in about 1360. This first complete history of Scotland drew heavily on myth and legend in its early volumes, and Fordoun seems to have rationalized several variations of the story of Scota found in Irish mythology. According to Fordoun, it was Goldeglas, who he calls Gaethilos, who married a pharaoh's daughter called Scota. Now, Goldeglas and Scota were subsequently exiled from Egypt. The reasons vary, and after wandering for many years, they eventually settled in the northwest corner of what is now called Spain, near the modern city of Corunna. Now, having settled in Spain, they had a son, Mil Espana. Here are things that get a little complicated, because by some accounts, Mil Espana married another woman called Scota, who, coincidentally, was also the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh. This suggests that, depending on which source you believe, Scota was either the wife, the mother, or the grandmother of Mil Espana. In some ways, it doesn't actually matter, because the key purpose of the myth was to tie the regal authority to the kings of Ireland, and subsequently Scotland, back to a source of power that would never be questioned. An Egyptian pharaoh would serve this purpose admirably. However, writers of the time, in order to legitimize their writing and transform their myths into fact, would also intertwine their stories with the Christian Bible in some form or another. Now, that doesn't mean the story isn't true, it just means it's unverifiable, and in their time, a sin to even question it. The Celtic language was formed from so many, then became divided as it spread into main groups. The continental Celtic and insular Celtic, and the differences probably came as the language mixed with the indigenous languages. The continental Celtic language spoken on the continent, and from what I have been able to gather, there are two main continental languages, Gaulish and Celto-Iberian. The Gaulish language referred to the ancient Celtic people living in Gaul, which includes France, Belgium, Lower Countries, part of Switzerland and Austria, and even parts of Alps and of Italy. Now, there were many different Gaulish tribes, so it is assumed that they had many different dialects. Celto-Iberian was also spoken on the Iberian Peninsula. Ancient people who lived with native Iberian people in mostly north and central Spain, mainly between the Ebro and Tagus rivers. One of their chief cities was Numantia, which was besieged and sacked by the Romans in 133 BC. There is another group of Celtic people that migrated to the east and settled in Central Asia Minor in the mid-2nd century BC, and they are known as the Galatians. Now, it's not known if they spoke a different Celtic language than the Gauls, but the region where they lived became known as Galatia, and through conquest became a Roman protectorate. Now, the Apostle Paul famously had visited and written letters to the Galatian followers in the 1st century AD. All continental Celtic languages are extinct now, and very little is known about the languages. However, the insular Celtic is better documented. The insular Celtic referred to the languages spoken in the British Isles and Brittany. The insular Celtic was itself divided into two broad groups, in which the modern Celtic languages were derived from Brythonic, or British, and Goidelic, which is Irish. Brythonic is also called P-Celtic, which comprised Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. By the time the Romans left and the Anglo-Saxons settled in Britain, the Celtic Britons had settled in regions that still exist today. Cornish was spoken in Cornwall, southwest England. Welsh was spoken in most parts of England even before the Anglo-Saxons, and that included the southern part of Scotland. Ancient Scotland was known as Caledonia or Alba at the time of the Romans. Some of the Welsh-speaking Britons fled across the channels to the Armorican Peninsula in Gaul, modern-day Brittany. Now, Gaelic languages were referred to as the Q Celtic languages, comprising Irish Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, and Manx from the Isle of Man. Now, it is not certain if Ireland had ever spoken a P Celtic language before, but, before the arrival of the Gaelic Celts. But Ireland was called Iarna by the 2nd century geographer Ptolemy, while it was called Hiberia by the Romans. The people of Ireland were also called Scoti, so Ireland was also called Scotia around the 4th century. Now, these Scoti invaded and colonized Argyll and Alba and established a kingdom known as Dalriada. The Scoti warred and then intermingled with the Picts, and the whole of Alba was renamed Scotland, or the land of the Scots. That was the reason why Scotland spoke a Gaelic language and shared strong cultural, mythological, and folkloric ties to Ireland. The Irish had also settled on the Isle of Man around the 5th century BC. Around the 5th century AD, displacing the P Celtic language spoken there. The Irish invaders also established a kingdom of Dyfed in southern Wales. Now, this is how we come to have the Gaelic languages today. And I encourage you to learn one of these wonderful languages. It's great. Or at least, some bits and pieces so that you can pass them on to your descendants and keep the Celtic languages alive.